joining us today for our CN2747 presentation with updates. Before we get started, we'd just like to say if you enjoy what the museum is doing and you're enjoying our small talks, to think about supporting the museum. You can do this through making a donation or becoming a museum member. This is all available on our website. You can stay in touch. You can visit our website, www.transconamuseum.mb.ca. You can follow us on social media, so on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, our blog. You can join our monthly mailing list where we send out e-newsletters. We only send out 1 to 2 emails a month, so we won't be spamming you. But it's just a way to show your support of what we do here at the museum. We would like to acknowledge that we are meeting on Treaty 1 territory, the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. So once again, welcome to CN2747 with an update. So to begin with, we're going to be, I should introduce myself. My name is Alana Hareda, and I'm the curator at the Transcona Museum. And on the technical side of things today is the assistant curator, Jennifer Maxwell.
Hello.
So if you have any questions or any comments during the presentation, please leave them in the comment box below, or if you're joining us via Zoom, in the chat. And we'll get to them during our live question and answer period. And Jennifer will relay those messages back to me. So the image that you see on the screen here, this is, as best we can tell, would have been one of the very first images of the 2747. And we believe it was taken when it came off the manufacturing line. We actually have very little when it comes to the history of the 2747. So in April of 1926, it was built at the CN Transcona shops. It was the first steam locomotive built in Western Canada, and again, built here in Transcona. So very significant to the community and also Canadian history as well. In the 1930s to the 1950s, it was used as a freight hauler. We know it worked in northern Manitoba in the area around the Pas, but that's about it. We don't have much about its service, where it worked, what it did. So we're looking to get more of that information. So if you have stories or even photographs of the 2747, please let us know, get in contact with us, because we would like to expand our collection that we have around the 2747. In 1960, it was retired after 34 years of service, and it was saved from demolition by the Kiwanis Club of Transcona. And then in May of 1960, it was placed on permanent outdoor display in Kiwanis Park. Now actually Rotary Heritage Park is the name of the park in Transcona, and it's along Plessis Road north of Kildare. And the engine has been in that park since it was placed there in 1960. In March of 1981, the Kiwanis Club of Transcona was disbanding, so they actually transferred ownership to the Midwestern Rail Association. The Midwestern Rail Association is the organization that runs the Winnipeg Railway Museum. In December of 2015, the Transcona Historical Museum acquired the 2747 for $1. But before that, actually, just going back a little bit, before we had ownership, there had been talk of moving the engine into the new Transcona library that was being built prior to 2015, so before construction. And it was looked at, and it was determined that that would be too expensive to do, to move the engine, to incorporate it into the new Transcona library. So that plan was essentially abandoned. And it was after that that the museum acquired the engine. And we have no plans on moving it. It will be remaining in the park. So in 2017, we launched our Save 2747 campaign with all funds and proceeds going towards the restoration and preservation of the engine. In May of 2017, the museum hired GP Heritage Consulting to complete a condition report and assessment. So the gentleman from GP Heritage Consulting came out and reviewed the engine, went over every square inch letting us know what work it needed, what needed to be repaired, how to do it, and some costing for that. And his cost of producing that report was just under $10,000. And we received that report by June of 2017.
We have a question.
Okay.
This is jumping ahead a little bit, but will it receive the correct logo on the tender one day?
So the question that we received, if you couldn't hear Jennifer, was will it receive the correct logo on the tender one day? So the discussion that we have had with the Save 2747 committee is that we are not taking the engine back to what it looked like when it first came off the line, that first initial picture. What we are going to be doing is taking the engine back to the look and preserving it to the condition, as best condition we can, as it looked when it went into the park. So the logo that would have been on the engine when it first initially went into the park in 1960 will be the logo that we will look at putting back on the engine. Hope that answered your question. In November of 2017, a preliminary concept design for a protective enclosure is unveiled. So just our general ideas of what we would like for it to happen, because we are not going to just leave it in the park exposed. We are going to be building a roof structure that will go over it to help protect it from the elements and the sun as well. In July of 2018, preservation and restoration work began with volunteers from the community. We were able to get a couple LDR grants from the City of Winnipeg, $10,000 for high priority repairs, and an additional $10,000 to cover the cost of that condition assessment that had been done in 2017. In October of 2018, our volunteer preservation crew put in over 200 hours of work on the engine. And our volunteers, like I said, are from the community. A lot of them are retired CN employees, or they are train enthusiasts who have a love for rail and rail history. And one of our volunteers actually worked on the engine when it was in service. So we have gotten a bit of information about the history of the engine from him, but he has been amazing to have on this project because he knows the engine and he knows what is where and how things were used and things like that. So he's been really great to have on our volunteer crew. In May of 2019, we received $20,000 in funding from the Winnipeg Foundation to go towards the blast cleaning and repainting. And at that time, our volunteer crew, again, got out and were able to start working on the engine as well. We held a barbecue fundraiser to raise funds and awareness for our preservation restoration project of the engine. And we also met with a representative from CN to discuss the possible involvement in our preservation project. In August 2019, we contracted Kinetic Machine Limited to complete welding repairs on the engine, and those repairs had been indicated in our condition assessment that we had done on the 2747. In September of 2019, we found out that our application to building sustainable communities through the province of Manitoba had been approved for an additional $20,000 in funding. And we contracted Winnipeg Sandblasting to complete the blast cleaning and repainting. And actually, September 2019 was when the CN 100 celebrations were actually happening here in Winnipeg. So our MP, Daniel Blakey, took a senior executive of CN, Sean Finn, around the 2747 for a tour, showing him what we had been doing already and talking about our plans for the engine, just to show CN that we're doing things. We're not just waiting to hear back from them or to see, to pique their interest in helping. In October 2019, work had to shut down due to bad weather, so the blast cleaning and repainting was delayed. They had essentially put up tarps to start the blast cleaning, and the weather turned. They were unable to do any of that work. at that point. And we held a fundraiser trivia night at the Transcona Legion, which was sold out, and it was a really great fun fundraiser that we put on that actually raised a good amount of money for the engine as well. Sorry, I have a creaky chair. So in November of 2019, I put in a request for an extension for the provincial funding with support from our MLA, James Teitzma, as the provincial funding of $20,000 the project needed to be complete by the end of March 2020. And because of the weather and the fact the engine is outside, we were not going to be able to blast, clean, and repaint in the middle of winter. So in March of 2020, we received that extension from the province, and that extension carried over to March 31st, 2021. We had heard that CN is still considering a partnership with the museum regarding the 2747 and the help with the project. In April of 2020, we started looking at developing an RFP for construction drawings of a shelter and better estimates of costs. And March, April, we actually had a few more things planned for this year, but unfortunately they were canceled, postponed, delayed because of the current pandemic situation. So beginning in June, the blast cleaning, so Winnipeg Sandblasting came out to the engine and they started setting up to do the blast cleaning on the engine. And by August of 2020, they were finished, and then they were able to repaint the engine. And that is essentially where we are right now. We did just, however, at the beginning of September was doors open here in Winnipeg, and we did open up the gates around the 2747 and had a socially distanced times available for people to come in and get up close to the engine. And that was pretty well attended for the situation that's going on right now. So the 2747 today. So the question is, like, why preserve the 2747? So it is without question a historically significant railway artifact that is worth preserving for current and future generations. It has tremendous potential for interpretive demonstrations and supervised visitor interaction. And as I mentioned before, it will be staying in its current location. We have no plans to move it. It would not be feasible. It's in a great location where it is now. It's staying where it is. As I mentioned earlier, we do some behind the fence tours, and those started in 2017, and we've offered those to interested visitors during special events only. Feedback from these events has always been positive, and it's increased awareness and attention to the project and the 2747. We installed a banner on the fence to raise awareness. Last year, we did a Dine and Donate barbecue, which unfortunately postponed, canceled for 2020 this year. Doors open 2020. We did have the gates open for a couple of hours. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to do, it's looking like we're not going to be able to do our trivia night for this year. So again, look for that. Fingers crossed, 2021 we'll be able to get back in and have some large group, have the trivia night where large groups of people can get together. So the CN 2747 is important. As I mentioned earlier, it's the first steam engine built at the Transcona shops, and it was built in April 1926. It was one of 33 steam locomotives constructed at the shops, and it was the only one that was safe from being scrapped. So all the rest of those 32 other engines no longer exist. Following 34 years of service, the locomotive was retired and donated by CN as a token of dedication to the citizens of Transcona. And it's a lasting testament to the workers of the Transcona shops, a reminder of the origins of the community, but also to Manitobans and Canadians. This is a piece of Canadian history that we have here in Transcona. And it's important to recognize that and also to preserve that for future generations. So these are just some of the historical images we actually have of the 2747. Now, these two images that you see here, this is preparing actually the ground in Kiwanis Park, which is now Rotary Heritage Park. They are actually preparing to put in piles because the engine weighs as much as it does. If they didn't put in piles, it would be sinking. So this is them preparing the ground and pouring the piles for the engine. Some surveying going on, figuring out where it's going to be. Another very interesting part of this photograph is there isn't much else that you can see in these images of the community. So the community has definitely grown up around this area in Transcona, significantly even in the past few years.
So it's just in like the middle of nowhere for like a
It
time?
these pictures definitely make it look like it was in the middle of nowhere. Yep. So to actually get the engine in the track, it wasn't like trucked in. They actually laid railway track off the beach line, which is that railway track that comes, crosses Kildare. They built a spur line into the park and then drove the train in. So these are images of them actually preparing the track to bring the engine in. And these are a couple historical images that we have from 1965 onward showing the engine in the park. Like I said, we don't have that many photographs of the 2747, so these are a few of them. So its current condition, over the years, the elements as well as vandalism and theft have taken a toll on this majestic community treasure. So when we had GP Heritage Consulting come out to complete that condition assessment, he produced a report, as I had mentioned, that contains restoration recommendations and preservation needs for the historic engine, as well as projected cost estimates. And as he was doing his report, he basically said, if we choose to do nothing, estimated between 8 to 10 years, and it will likely just be scrap metal. So we really had to act quickly. And with his report, he broke items down into urgent repairs, high repairs, and then just repairs. So we've been working through those. I believe all of the urgent repairs have been done, and most of the high need repairs have also been completed. But the work includes, but is not limited to, the minor repairs and cleaning, safety and security measures, sandblasting and painting of the exterior, procurement and fabrication of parts, installment of new materials, refinishing small fittings, stabilizing rusted surfaces, weatherproofing, and again, that protective enclosure to minimize exposure to elements. So what our volunteer crew, we're going to go through some photos of some of the work that they've actually done over the past couple of years. Unfortunately, this year, just due to the sandblasting that was taking place over the summer, our volunteer crew was not able to get in there because the sandblasters were there quite frequently and it was very loud, very dusty. We couldn't have other people in that area. So what we have completed. So the engine has been blast cleaned and repainted. Big old check mark. Minor repairs and cleaning. So the bumper was replaced. The running boards have been replaced. They removed the cab floor, which we were hoping to get that replaced and put back in this summer. It will likely be next spring. Replacement doors, the painting of some wood. For safety and security measures, we've installed signage on the fence. There's a security gate that we have that goes in the cab as well to stop people from being able to enter the cab. The sandblasting and repainting of the exterior was done. Procurement and fabrication of parts. Many of our volunteers are retired CN employees, which I mentioned. So they have actually been able to use some of their connections to get parts for the engine, or have used their skills to fabricate new parts for us, which is pretty amazing. Refinishing of small fittings. We have some of our gauges that have actually been refinished. And we have started, the protective enclosure has not been constructed, but we have done some things to minimize exposure to the elements. So part of the tender was covered And we are currently waiting for a letter from a company with their quote on what it would cost to have official drawings and construction plans completed. So we should be hearing very shortly about that, and then we'll be able to move forward in that next phase of the project. So some images of what the engine looked like when we first acquired it. So here, this is the old bumper. As you can see, it rotted away. There's almost no wood left to it. This is where, if you can see the mouse, this is up at the front. So you can see where there's some holes in the metal where welding work needed to be done. This is interior of the cab. So these are some of the gauges. Looking at the boiler, this is some graffiti and vandalism we've had inside as well. This is on top of the water tender, but just from snow and water pooling here, completely rusted out the metal. And so there was a large hole up on the water tender. The photo on the right, again, we're back in the cab. The doors that were once on the engine were gone. You can see just the, although it's a little blurry, the condition of the boiler, everything going on. So not horrible, but not great. So this is some during photos. So this is the bumper. So our volunteer crew took out all the wood, and so you can see just how many bolts were used to hold that bumper in place. One of our volunteers was able to get wood for us to use on that bumper, and very luckily it snowed the day that they were moving the bumper into the fenced area, so they're able to drag it in the snow. And here they are drilling new holes for these bolts here so it could be reinstalled. And in this photo here, back here, you can see that the new bumper has been installed. So it was a big project. It was a lot of work, but pretty significant what they were able to accomplish. The running boards have been replaced. They were taken off for the blast cleaning, however, so they will need to go back on. So running boards here. There were some temporary doors installed, and we also have even another set of doors that are on the engine now that have been constructed to look like the doors that were actually on it. So interior, another photo of the boiler in the cab. I just wanted to point out though, where the red circle is, these are some of the gauges that were on the boiler. We had a volunteer take them off and he refinished them. So these are the same gauges in the same order that they appear in this picture, just after they had been refinished. So he stripped the paint off of it, he buffed up the brass, replaced the glass, replaced the hand dials. Unfortunately, we don't know what this one was. We need to get some more information, photos, pictures, diagrams, things like that, so we can get a new face for this one made up. Just showing our security gate here, photo on the left. And then here you can see we have replaced the metal on top of the water tender, so that hole is no longer there, so it's more stable and secure. This image over here shows some of the welding work that was being done to repair some of the holes and areas of loss that we had on the engine. So all along here on the tender, up here, even over there, welding work was done. Another image here. They did, this is the cap that we put on and replaced some missing pieces as well of metal. So then that goes into this year. So the next few images will be showing the blast cleaning as it was happening. So this is the front of the engine after it's been blasted. Now you can see that it's orange in color. That's because it was blasted and then it rained, so the exposed metal actually re-rusted. So part of what was going on and why it took as long as it did was anytime there was any moisture, the metal would re-rust and would have to be blasted again. So there was the engine was areas were blasted a number of times, and they also worked in smaller sections. They were also limited by if it was a really windy day, they couldn't get out there and blast just because of they didn't want the material going all over. So you can also in this image see sort of that replacement door that's already been put in. Just another viewed the other side of the engine, seeing how the wheels had been blasted, underside. Excuse me. Now this is probably just a couple of days before they started the repainting. So most of the original paint had been blasted off. And the whole reason for blast cleaning is there were so many layers of paint on the engine, and the paint was failing in some areas, it was peeling off, and to have a really secure coating on the metal will help prevent additional rust. So we wanted to take it down to base metal, get all that off, and then put a strong coat of paint on it, and there's numerous coats of paint on the engine to really secure and help cover and protect that metal. Unfortunately, while they were blast cleaning, more areas of loss were discovered that will need to be welded and repaired throughout the engine. We had to make a call, myself and I'm co-chair of the 2747 committee along with the other co-chair, Peter Martin. We went out and we took a look at it, and we had to make the decision, do we stop and have welders come back in and fix this and then we repaint? And it was pretty much the end of August at this point. We did not want to lose the weather. We did not want to chance it and have the engine completely exposed over winter, because that just would have been caused more damage. And so we made the decision to go ahead and have it painted, and we will have these areas repaired in the future, and we'll just likely have to spot paint areas. Talking with the company that did the sandblasting and the repainting, any additional paint that has been left over, they said we can have, so we'll have that same paint to put back on in the future. Just again, some more areas, sort of what it looked like up close to as well after all the paint had been blasted off, and things that I thought were actually like fabric were metal, and seeing just, yeah, it looked completely different. You could see different aspects of the engine getting up close after it had been blasted. Again, just a couple more of them actually working. You can see the tarping on the fence to keep that dust in the sand. It's sand blasting essentially. So the product that they use to blast the paint off. Close up of the wheels. And then she was repainted, and she's so sparkly shiny now. So just a couple of views of the engine as she looks since she's been painted. Really looks really sharp. Looks really clean. Looks not stable is not the right word, but it looks secure is also not the right word, but it looks protected, like for future, you know, until we're able to get that roof structure over it, you know, this is better than what had previously been on the engine.
And that new coat of paint too, because there's nothing underneath all these layers that have been failing, like water's just going to wick right off this, so it's not going to collect and pool necessarily like it would with, or
get under old layer of paints. Yeah. So I actually also climbed into the cab area, and I took some photos. Unfortunately, they're not the best photos. I was using my cell phone. But you can also see sort of into the cab here. of what it looked like. Again, it's dark because of the black paint, and the windows got, I think, painted as well, but we've got different plexi material to go in those windows, and the volunteer crew are remaking the side windows that are going to go on the engine. So there will be more light that will come in, but so much better. Looks so much better than what it did. Just some other elements from in the interior. And then this is, I stepped back from the fence area. You'll notice this one section of fence, it looks like the fence is gone. But actually last summer, our volunteer crew painted the fence black. And the areas of the fence that were painted black are actually much easier to see through and actually see the engine. So this is the back side. This is looking towards Kildare, not from Kildare, looking east. This is looking west. So the areas of fence that are black make it much, much easier for you to actually see the engine from the road. And we are always looking for volunteers to help out with the engine. This year, unfortunately, our volunteers weren't able to do much. It was a mixture of the blast cleaning and the pandemic, but essentially the majority of the work has been done by our volunteer crew. So we're, seeking help from Transcona and the Winnipeg community. We need dedicated volunteers to assist with the work, like hands-on on the engine, with donations of money, equipment, supplies, and time, and just spreading the word to other interested individuals. So if you're interested, you can contact the museum to get your name added to our volunteer list. I don't know if you're really interested in working on the engine. There's usually limited numbers who are out there each time working on it. We have a volunteer coordinator who organizes the crew that goes out there. And we do actually have an age restriction. I believe you have to be 18 or older to actually go on and work on the engine. But if other younger individuals are interested, we can potentially find other work for them to help out at any of our events that we're doing for the 2747, things like that. So if you're interested, contact the museum, we'll get your name and we'll pass it along to our volunteer coordinator. And just a few fun facts about the 2747. So it is the museum's largest and heaviest artifact, and it's so big, even if we could move it, it couldn't fit in the building. It's essentially bigger than our building, longer. It's not actually in Transcona. Well, it is, and it isn't. It's located in the Radisson riding, which is the provincial area designations for MLAs. It's a 280 consolidation, so that has to do with the wheels. So there's 2 lead wheels, 8 powered, and 0 training. The total length is 69 feet 7 1/8 inches. The total weight is 394,160 pounds. And the tender capacity held 16 tons of coal. And actually, as we were preparing for the GP Heritage Consulting to come out, we opened up the coal tender, the coal auger, and found a bunch of coal still in the coal auger, which makes sense because they drove the engine into the park, turned it off, and just left. So the image that I have here, this is actually some of that coal that came out from within the coal auger on the engine. And we have that on display right now. So if anyone has any questions, if you're joining us via Zoom, please leave your question in the chat. But if you're joining us via Facebook Live, please comment on the live post. Just give a couple minutes here. There's a bit of a delay between Zoom and Facebook Live. So we'll just give it a minute or two to see if any questions come through. Oh, and if you're typing up questions, the image that you see on this slide, this is our our first idea of what the design could look like for the roof structure. So it will be a roof structure. It's not a fully enclosed building. There's a back wall to stop snow from blowing in, but also that's an area where we can put historical information, didactic panels, things like that. On that side too, looking at actually building a ramp so it would be an accessible artifact for people to come and explore, and a new security fence. So this is our primary concept, but you know, it will essentially get more detailed as we work with a design company, architectural company, to fully design it and produce construction plans. Any questions, Jen? No questions, that's fine. If you do have a question after the fact, if you're seeing this after it's not live anymore, just leave it in the comments and we'll do our best to get back to you. This video is also going to be posted on YouTube, so you can always leave a comment in the YouTube section of the video and we'll do our best to answer any questions you have at a later time. So we do have upcoming talks. So on October 13th, we will be doing the power and history of insulators. October 20th, we will be doing What If Transcona? So this is looking at 3 things that were planned to happen in Transcona, but didn't. But what if they had? How would that have changed Transcona? November 3rd, we're going to be doing Stories of Remembrance from Hometown to the Front Lines. This is sort of a little preview information regarding our new Remembrance Week exhibit that will be opening November 5th. December 1st, we will be doing A History of Regent Avenue to the 1930s. And December 15th, we'll be doing part 2 of Snapshot, a look into the 1960s Transcona. So it's not the same one we did last time, and it'll be all new images and information. I want to thank you for joining us today, and once again ask you to support the Transcona Museum. So by making a donation or becoming a museum member, you know, staying in touch, checking out our website, and I realize there's a typo in our website address. It's www.transconamuseum.nb.ca. Follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, our blog, and join our mailing list to keep up to date with what's going on at the museum. So thanks for joining us today. We hope you all have a great day and hope to see you next time. Bye.